Good morning, Matt. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
And it's good to see you. It's been a long time.
Been too long, I think.
I know. Well, we're just gonna give everyone a few minutes here, a couple minutes to jump on Zoom, and I will do your introduction.
Wonderful.
We'll have to get together sometime.
We need to.
I know.
We probably have a lot to catch up on, Jenny.
I do believe we do.
You're so good for a while.
Yeah. Well, it's been a crazy time for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, let's see how many people we have on. So we have 53 people signed in. Some of them are in groups. So if you're ready, I'll go ahead and start our introduction. Okay. Well, let me get my... Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Grand Rounds. Our speaker today is Dr. Matt Vassar. He will be speaking on Predatory Journals. Our program is underwritten by an educational grant through OSU-MC Graduate Medical Education, and a disclosure statement has been signed. It is on file in our office. Dr. Vassar received his Doctor of Philosophy in Research, Evaluation, Measurement, and Statistics at the Oklahoma State University in 2006. He also received a Master of Business Administration at the Spears School of Business at OSU in 1999, and his Bachelor of Arts and Sociology at the College of Arts and Sciences at OSU in 1997. Dr. Vassar's research focuses on making research better, improving the conduct and reporting of clinical research, and exploring the effects of bias on study outcomes. He has published over 100 peer-reviewed articles in some of the most prestigious journals in medicine, including the Journal of the American Medical Association, JAMA Internal Medicine, JAMA Oncology, JAMA Neurology, JAMA Dermatology, JAMA Otolaryngology, Annals of Emergency Medicine, the British Journal of Anesthesia, Annals of Oncology, and European Urology. Dr. Vassar's research has been featured in the New York Times, Science, Nature, the British Medical Journal, Reuters Health, and many other national news outlets. His publications have made the top 5% of all research outputs on altmetrics numerous times. Please welcome Dr. Matt Vassar.
Thank you, Jenny, and it's a pleasure to be here at Grand Rounds. This is my first Grand Rounds ever in all of my time at OSU, and it's virtually. So I'm excited to get to be here with you today and to present on a topic that I think affects our clinical faculty, our residents, and our medical students equally, and it's a growing trend and a growing problem that I wanted to shed some light on with you today. So let me share my screen. Jenny, are you able to see my screen?
Yes, Matt.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, so this idea came about from an experience several months ago concerning a resident who had submitted a research paper to a journal, and the journal was requesting some money to publish the paper. And there were some questions about that model of publishing, and I met with a few people to discuss the idea. And And so it brought to mind this terrible issue of Predatory Journals that's popping up all over the medical literature. And it's something that I thought could be addressed in a grand round. So that's how it first came about. And I want to begin my presentation with an unfortunate tale. In about 2018, I had a student come on my research rotation. The student is now a resident somewhere else. But the student came on my rotation, as many have, and they worked on a research study with me. And the rotation ended and the student started submitting the manuscript for publication, and it was a good study. So eventually I received word that the article had been accepted for publication. I was excited about it. And a few weeks go by and we were told that there was a fee associated with publishing in this journal. It raised a red flag because I wasn't aware that we had submitted to a journal that required a fee. So I went ahead and looked into it a bit further and noticed that it was an article that was published by a publishing group called iMedPub. It raised a red flag immediately because iMedPub is a predatory publisher. And I'll talk about what they are in a minute. Immediately after we found out, I asked the student to contact the journal editor to request its removal from their journal and received no response. So I have an article as of now published in this journal that's predatory. It did not go through peer review and it was accepted immediately without correction. The journal is called the Journal of Clinical Gastroenterology and Hepatology. It even has an ISSN number. So it looks on the surface to be a legitimate journal. One trick of a predatory journal is they will use clever journal names that sound very similar to a reputable journal name, and they'll make small changes. So in this case, the actual journal is called Clinical Gastroenterology and Hepatology. That is a real journal. And so it's very easy to make this mistake. So I don't fault the student at all for making this mix up because they are so closely named. But I think this is a good example of the need to really understand predatory publishing, what that looks like, and how to prevent it in the future. So what is a predatory journal? Predatory just refers to entities that prey on academics for financial profit. They levy article processing charges to publish your articles. The articles are posted on a website, open access for anyone to see. The problem is that they don't meet any sort of scholarly publishing standards. They don't go through peer review. If they do, it's not a true peer review. And we'll talk about other features to help you identify predatory journals in several slides. But for now, just understand that these are people who set up servers in different countries, sometimes in their garage, and pose as journals. And researchers are deceived into submitting their articles to these people, and they get published on these websites. So let's talk about a traditional subscription model for journals versus open access models. I want to be clear that open access journals are legitimate and are fine to publish in. A lot of journals are moving toward an open access model, at least in part. So it's going to be something that we have to deal with moving forward because of the way that science is transitioning in terms of publishing. In the traditional subscription model, think New England Journal of Medicine, when you submit an article, the author transfers their copyright to the journal, and the primary revenue stream is through fees charged to the readers and to libraries. So in that case, the OSU Medical Library has a subscription to the New England Journal of Medicine, and they pay big subscription fees so that the stakeholders at OSU CHS have the privilege of reading the newest editions of the New England Journal of Medicine. As a physician, you can also subscribe individually to the New England Journal of Medicine, and you can receive a paper copy submitted to you through the mail. In an open access model, the authors themselves pay for the article processing charges. This can be really expensive. I think on average, an article processing fee is about $3,000, although they can be more expensive than that. So it becomes very expensive to publish this way. Sometimes the funding agency will pay for open access charges if the research is funded somehow and it's written into the grant application. The author in this case retains copyright with a Creative Commons license and have the rights to reuse the article in any way they see fit, which could include posting them on their personal websites or posting them on university websites. The key is with an open access model that as the author pays that money, the article is freely accessible to anyone for reading. That's appealing to academics in particular, because sometimes we're evaluated on the number of times our studies are read and the number of times our studies are cited by others. And if we have it openly available for everyone, people across the world who don't have access to the same robust library resources can still cite our work. So our citation counts can go up. So there's some benefits to the open access model above and beyond traditional subscription models. So to recap, traditional models are generally free to the author to submit. And the way that the journal recoups money is from revenue streams associated with library subscriptions and personal subscriptions to the journal. In an open access model, the journal gets money from the authors themselves who pay the money up front following its acceptance. And then that allows anyone in the world to view that study. So predatory publishing is relatively recent. That seems to be exploiting some key features of the open access publishing model. And what they tend to do is they collect these article processing charges that are far less expensive than those that are found in legitimate open access journals. So the contrast is a few $100s versus a few $1,000s. So a common practice among predatory publishers is that they send frequent emails to a large number of individuals asking you to submit a manuscript to their journal for publication. They like to praise you as an expert or an opinion leader in your field, and they'll promise you rapid publication for authors' fees that are much lower than legitimate paying journals. I receive these emails daily, and I'm going to share some of them with you. I took a snapshot of about a day of the ones that I got to show you what these things look like, in hopes that if you start receiving these, that you will know quickly that they're junk mail and you'll delete them. So these invitations sent by emails may seem attractive or an easy solution to less experienced or early career researchers who need to publish in order to advance their career, or to those desperate to get a publication accepted after a number of rejections, or those simply not paying attention. So if I think about our learners, ranging from medical students to residents and even junior clinical faculty, I can see there being the potential for those learners who want to get research outcomes to be lured into something like this if they receive an email to do so, because it seems like a good option. That's why I want to really call attention to this issue, because I've heard from program directors at different schools and places that they're actually checking the publication records of the learners or the residents applying for fellowship to see if they are appearing in predatory journals or not as part of their inspections. So that's something that some directors are starting to do with people applying for residency and for fellowship. So these journals did not provide any peer review, which is the hallmark of traditional publishing, and they lack scientific merit necessary to gain future research funding and academic advancement. I think it's also important to think about non-peer reviewed work being flooded into the literature, and perhaps being used as the basis for clinical decision making. And that scares me a little bit. And I think we need to be really careful about that possibility and start to really understand the article that we're reading in Journal Club and whether it's in a predatory journal or not. I'm interested in doing some lines of research looking at whether predatory publications are being used by clinical practice guideline panels to inform those recommendations, and whether they're being incorporated into systematic reviews and other types of research where they could actually have influence. So that's something that's not yet been explored, but something that I'm thinking about doing in the future. And I think there's some needed work in that area to see the extent of this problem. So Shen and Bjork published a study a number of years ago. I think it's a 2015 study, but it illuminated some interesting characteristics at the time related to predatory publishing, and I wanted to point out a few of their results to you. You can see by the red line that between 2010 and 2014, the number of predatory journals dramatically increased from about 1,500 to about 8,000. And that was 2015. So imagine the number increased since. And I haven't seen updated numbers, but this is what the trend line looked like. The authors also divided journals into bins, and you can see based on the size of the publisher and how many journals they produce. But I think the important takeaway here is not the other lines, but the red line is showing the upper trend in terms of how much these predatory publishers are growing. So this, again, is looking at article volumes from 2010 to 2014. You can see a similar trend. So we had about 50,000 in 2010, and we're up to 420,000 by 2014. So you can see that this is becoming an increasing and growing problem in medical research and across all of science, to be honest. At the time, the distribution of corresponding authors by geographic region, India, there were more authors from India than other countries. You can see North America was only 9.2% of the authors, but still represented. And there is some understanding as to why this is occurring. In some of those countries, there's a big pressure to publish at the universities, and there's also pressure to publish in English publishing journals. And so this pressure will create the need for some of the faculty at these universities and medical schools to publish in these journals to get those outcomes that they need based on pressure. The article processing charges for predatory journals at the time, as you can see, is a few $100s. And so they're much cheaper. I think the JAMA Open journal has about $3,600 per article to publish there. BMJ Open, I think, is in the $2,000 range. And the PLOS journals are $2,000 to $3,000 as well. What I've noticed over time is that most journals that I've submitted to tend to have an open journal equivalent now. They're calling it a sister journal, and I'm seeing a lot of that going on. For example, the Journal of Bone and Joint Surgery, which is an orthopedics journal, now has a journal called Journal of Bone and Joint Surgery Open. So I see a lot of these journals that are following suit and having an open version of their journal for studies that aren't clinical in nature or maybe of interest, but not quite as highly important to the primary journal. Okay, so how do we tell if a journal is real or not? Well, I have some ideas to help guide you in that regard. Let's first talk about Bill's list of predatory journals and publishers. This list really began the whole notion of predatory publications. And so it was a very important list to help us start thinking about this complex issue. Bill's list ran from about 2011 to 2017. It was made by a librarian named Jeffrey Bill, in Colorado, and he provided lists of what he considered potential, possible, and probable predatory journals. The effort involved in developing Bill's list was impressive, and it was a good starting point at the time, but it had some limitations as well. He didn't list any specific criteria for categorizing a journal as predatory, and kind of to the detriment of his list, he blacklisted a few legitimate journals and publishers, particularly those from low and middle income countries. So in January 2017, Bill's list was taken off his website and is now defunct. And there haven't been any great explanations as to why that was taken down, although there's been some speculation about some threats and some other things that he experienced. And so he wound up taking that down. It still can be used. You can find archives of Bill's list, and I've used it to check publishers I'm unfamiliar with on occasion. There's also a website called thinkchecksubmit.org, and it is a guide to help people choose the right journal for their research. And you can log in and go through a couple of things, and it'll help you decide where to submit a study to. So this might be a good resource for some people to check into as they think about where to submit a journal article. It has a guide, and some of those questions are, do you or your colleagues know the journal? Usually if you know the journal and read it, or have seen it in Journal Club or other places, that it's reputable. And so that's an easy one. Can you easily identify and contact the publisher or not? Is the journal clear about the type of peer review it uses? Are the articles indexed in services that you use? Is it clear what fees will be charged? Do you recognize members on the editorial board or not? Sometimes some of the clinical specialties are very small, and so you may recognize particular names of people that you've met at conferences or elsewhere. And is the publisher a member of a recognized industry initiative? So there's several recognized industry initiatives. I'll point to 3 of them here and talk about them because they're the 3 that I am most familiar with. The Committee on Publication Ethics, known as COPE. COPE is the body that's responsible for mitigating ethical issues related to research. And most journals follow COPE guidelines for things like author disputes, retraction, and things like that. And so I've actually seen a study in which they looked at whether predatory publications listed COPE on their websites, and they found that a large number of predatory journals were talking about COPE on their websites to appear more legitimate. So you have to be careful about that as well. The DOAJ is the Directory of Open Access Journals, and it's a list of journals, of legitimate journals that have been vetted that are open access, or at least partially. And so that's a resource you can go to and check for open access publications that are legitimate. And they do a good job of vetting the predatory ones from the true open access journals. And you're probably familiar with the last one, although you may not know it in this by name, Journal Citation Report. This is the impact factor of journals. And so you'll see that oftentimes when you go to a website, to a journal, you'll see that it lists an impact factor. It's helpful to look at this report because it will tell you if the journal does indeed have an impact factor. Impact factor is simply a measure of the journal's prestige, and it's not a perfect measure, and there's some criticism about it. But in general, if you're looking to steer away from predatory journals with impact factors tend to be good ones and reputable ones in general. Now, there's also been cases where predatory journals are listing fake impact factors on their website. So that's, again, another thing that you have to be wary of. So many predatory journals are claiming that they're indexed with these services, but they're not really. Always check to see if a journal has an impact factor. The library has a subscription and can help guide people to determine whether a study has an impact factor or a journal has an impact factor. Another resource that I use quite often is Google Scholar. And if you go to Google Scholar, it divides journals by category. So I saw Dr. Kim on the call, I believe. So if I wanted to go to cardiology and look at the cardiology journals, it's going to rank the top 20 or 25 cardiology journals. And that would also be a list I would trust, because if you look at the cardiology list, you're going to recognize those names in those journals, and they probably highly correlate with the impact factors. So now let's talk about the qualities that will help you understand a predatory journal. This is a group out of Canada, Larissa Shamsier and others, and they study these issues. David Mower in Canada, they study these issues related to predatory publications that have done more probably to help us understand it than anyone else in the world. So here are 13 features of potentially predatory journals. Number one, the wide scope of interest includes non-biomedical subjects alongside biomedical topics. You're going to find lots of spelling and grammar errors on their websites. They're not very professional, oftentimes. You're going to find images that are distorted and fuzzy. They're intended to look like something they're not, or which are unauthorized. The homepage targets authors with invitations rather than targeting readers with contents. So if you were to go to, let's say, the JAMA website, what you're going to see is their newly published articles with links to start reading abstracts. If you go to these journals, you're going to see invitations to submit your paper there. They're also, they promote the index Copernicus value. I'll talk about that on another slide, but that's another common feature that you'll see, is that they have a value for index Copernicus. The description of the manuscript handling process is lacking. The manuscripts are requested to be submitted via email. If you've ever submitted an article to a reputable journal, most of them use some kind of an centralized system that causes you to create a login to that system and go through a bunch of steps to submit your article. There's really only 2 or 3 big systems I'm familiar with. And so one's called Manuscript Central. And so when you start seeing those submission systems, it tends to mean that they've paid a lot of money for those, and it probably helps legitimize the journal. In cases where they ask you to send your manuscript to a Yahoo account, that's pretty much a red flag at this point. You don't see that very often. I can't think of a time in the last several years where I've been asked to email a manuscript to a journal. The one exception is an Irish journal called Anesthesia, and they operate with a very old-fashioned model, but they're widely known and accepted journal, and so they operate a bit differently and a bit old school, and they may have changed since I last submitted there, but they're the one exception I can even think of where we didn't have to use a submission system. They promise rapid publication. We'll publish your study in a week or 3 days or 2 weeks. And they have no retraction policy. And information on whether and how journal content will be digitally preserved is absent. The article processing fees are very low, less than $102 in many cases. Journals claiming to be open access either retain copyright of published research or fail to mention copyright at all. And then the contact email address is non-professional and non-journal affiliated. Gmail, Hotmail, Yahoo, and some of those generic email addresses. Index Copernicus. This is a picture of the website. So it's an online database named after Nicholas Copernicus, containing user contributed information. And this information includes scientist profiles established in 1999 in Poland and operated by Index Copernicus International. The problem with this particular index is that it's highly controversial because a large proportion of predatory journals are included, and it's got a suspicious evaluation methodology. So why do predatory journals continue to flourish and be so popular and increase year by year? According to Lane and Winker, predatory journals provide young researchers who may not know better and academics in search of quick publication with a low barrier to publication. In too many settings, promotions committees and other such bodies focus on the number of publications rather than the quality of those publications and the venues in which they appear. Thus, predatory journals are likely to continue to prosper unless such bodies and funders begin to routinely scrutinize the quality as well as the quantity of their faculty's publications. Not by excluding all online journals from consideration, but by identifying acceptable journals according to quality criteria. I think that speaks well to some of the issues and things that we're seeing among people who need to publish and the pressures to do so, which is a rampant issue in academics. But among learners, medical students who want to get into a residency program and maybe residents who want to apply for fellowships and they want opportunities to publish as much as they can. So I think that is making this problem continue. So let's look at some of mine. I want you to look at the emails that I get. I get so many of these now. But just look at the way that they're approaching me. In the first case, I'm called Dr. Matt, and that's a big red flag because I don't think anyone would really call you that. And it's bolded. And this one is from the Japan Journal of Medicine, and they publish articles across a broad spectrum of medical, scientific, and subspecialties. Remember, one of the hallmarks of predatory publications is their broad focus. It's a trusted platform for publication of your latest trial. Now, if you'll notice, they picked a random study that I published, and they even truncated the name, and that's not even a trial. So they're calling my publication something that it not even is. Would you like to write original research, review, or mini reviews? They'll take anything I'll offer them. Awaiting your response, managing editor. Look at this one. This is from Annals of Clinical Hypertension, and that sounds like a legitimate journal, doesn't it? And they've tried to contact me several times, but there's no response from you. Kindly respond to our email. It's releasing volume 3, but due to the lack of manuscripts, we need your support. Okay, a journal, a reputable journal will not reach out to people begging for manuscripts. So if you ever see this, it's a red flag and run for the hills. You'll see here that the review process is only 10 to 15 days, and the release date will be at the end of January. There's no specific topic for the issue. It completely depends on your own research work. So I can send anything I want to the Annals of Clinical Hypertension. There's no restrictions. I can send anything I want. This is the Journal of Clinical Trials and Reports. Again, that sounds reasonable in name. You can see I'm bolded again. They promote and publish the articles for spreading the cutting edge research for clinical trials and clinical study. They welcome original manuscripts that meet the general criteria of significance and scientific excellence. And then based on your record of contributions in this field, we would like to invite you to submit an article. So you can see, again, that they're trying to appeal to my expertise by calling me, by pointing to my record of contributions to the field. Here's another one. This is an orthopedic journal, the Journal of Orthopedic Research and Therapy. Again, it sounds reputable. It even has a listed ISSN number. Again, I'm bolded a lot. Greetings from the journal. We mailed you several times in previous, but there is no response from you, so that we would like to contact you again. Again, you can see the English isn't what you would expect from a journal editor. Our journal is Open Access Journal, which is an open access journal which publishes articles related to Journal of Orthopedic Research and Therapy and its advanced technology. And they've successfully completed these volumes, and they're inviting me. We are aware of your reputation for quality of research and trustworthiness in the field of orthopedic research and therapy. So you can see again that they're begging me to submit something to them. And you can also see here, if you look down below in green, you can see that they're boasting a journal impact factor of 1.02. And look what's next, an index Copernicus value of 100. Now, anytime you see index Copernicus, remember, run for the hills. You don't want to submit to that journal. And you can see an example here from an email where they're citing that value and bragging about having that. Here's one where they use my first initial because I have a few publications on PubMed where I've listed my first initial and they're scraping PubMed to find my name and email address. Hope you're doing well. We are in shortfall of article for successful release of volume 3, issue 1. Is it possible for you to support us with your 2-page opinion or mini review for this issue? Again, they're desperate. They don't have any articles and they're needing one for volume 3, issue 1. Reputable journals will never beg for studies. So also keep that in mind. If you'll notice, another trend is that they're asking for very short things that I can deliver very quickly, a 2-page opinion or a mini review. So they're willing to take just about any type of study or any type of submission that I'm willing to do. This one says, any type of article, dear Dr. Matt Vassar. We're looking for scientific researchers who can help us for the better progress of our journal. I found your profile innovative and I'm inviting you to submit your valuable manuscript for publication of volume, I can't tell if that's 5, issue 1, in oncology and medicine. Again, that sounds very legitimate, like a very legitimate name. And if you're not careful, you could probably be fooled into accidentally submitting to one of these journals. This one just calls me a researcher. Dear researcher, we tried to reach you previously, but with no response from you, we would like to contact you again. So again, you can see that they tend to say those exact things over and over. We would really appreciate if you would consider contributing at least a 2-page communication, mini review, or case report. As we are in shortfall of 1 article for release of our upcoming issue. So I hope you're starting to know some trends. You also see an ISSN number at the top. And that ends my presentation of the content about predatory journals. I don't know if the typical format is to have time for questions or not, but I'm happy to if that's the case. But I'll let Dr. Alexopoulos direct me on next steps with this presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Vassar. Yes, let's open it up to questions. If anyone has any questions, you can open your mics up or you can place it in the chat at the bottom of our Zoom. Just looking for questions. I don't see any questions. Dr. Vassar, do you see any questions?
I don't.
Okay, well, Dr. Vassar, thank you so much for being able to do this type of presentation. I know that we have had some inquiries about this, and I think you've enlightened us in terms of what to look for, as we do more research with an effort toward publishing. We just need to be aware of these predatory processes and these notifications and how to recognize it. So thank you so much. We look forward to having you back again and talk to you soon.
Wonderful. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks, Jenny. I appreciate it.
Okay, bye for now.